Hello, my name is Pip Bradford, and I'm the production manager for the 2021 Toronto Comic Arts Festival, and I'm delighted to be welcoming you to our Cole Paul's Spotlight. It is also my privilege to take this moment to honor and acknowledge the original caretakers of this land, the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Toronto is in a territory that was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, Haudenosaunee, and allied nations to share and care for this land. We also acknowledge that this area is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. TCAF makes this acknowledgement as a reminder that we are all treaty people and that we have a responsibility to the land and to each other. Through our programming for the festival itself and our other year-round activities, TCAF is committed to strengthening its relationship with Indigenous communities across Canada through centering Indigenous voices and perspectives in comic arts. And now I'm going to pass the mic for this panel over to Jarrett, our moderator.
Okay, I guess my microphone is this pair of headphones. Hello, welcome everyone to Spotlight on Cole Paul's. My name, if you don't know me, which why would you, is Jarrett Samson. I am formerly of the Beguiling Books and Art, and I worked on the TCAF Festival, and I am the new incoming director for the Vancouver Comic Arts Festival. I also play in a band called Tough Age, which will become relevant later. But more importantly, we are all here to welcome Cole Pauls. Cole is the artist of this year's TCAF poster. Cole is also the author of the book Pizza Punks, coming out this May, that we're promoting now from Conundrum Press, along with, I don't even know where to start with Cole. So many other wonderful things. So we're going to do that as we go. So I'm just going to get right into it, because Cole and I have known each other for a long time. And pretty much we're just going to chat now, and we're going to talk about all the great work that he is doing, and I am going to nod my head and say that is great work. So please welcome with me, and on your own computer screen, Cole Pauls.
Hello. Insert audience cheer. Just before we start, I also want to acknowledge I am in Vancouver, so I am on the traditional territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. I am originally from the Yukon, and I've been living in Vancouver for 8 years. So I am Tahltan First Nation, but I am not Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, or Musqueam. So I am an Indigenous settler on Vancouver's land. So yeah, thanks, Jarrett.
Oh, a pleasure. Pleasure. Man, yeah, this was we had gone back and forth a lot on how this is going to go, and it feels like the time is finally here. It's like Christmas morning to get to sit down and chat with you, and such a long, I'm not going to say that, but a long trip to get here. Like, you've been in Vancouver 8 years. That's probably almost how long we've known each other now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Actually, I have the gig poster up. It was September 8th at Astorino's.
Yeah.
It was an Evaporator show. So I think I had only been living in Vancouver for like a month.
Wow.
Or like less than a month. And I was on the drive, and I was walking up a commercial, and I saw this tiny flyer, and I was like, is that Nardwuar on that flyer? And I looked closer, and I was like, it's Nardwuar's band, the Evaporators, and they're playing a free show at Astorino's. And you were one of the openers, and so was...
It was Sean Mrazek Lives, right?
It was the Goblins.
Oh, the Goblin, yeah.
Yeah, so I think... I'm trying to remember this correctly. It was like the Goblins, then you, then...
I think so, yeah, but I thought Sean Mrazek played as well. Maybe I'm wrong. I knew the Goblins played because at that time it was just Nardwuar and Sean was then the other member of the Goblins. But yeah, maybe I'm misremembering. I know the Goblins played because I can think of the drawing of them on the poster. They're in the lower left with their hoods on.
Yeah, Mitch Clam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's always, it's funny because you specified that small flyer, because that's what I always remember about meeting you there, is that they had printed that Mitch Clem poster so big, and it was like plastered. And I remember we were standing there talking under that huge poster. And I don't know, that always, so like, that's always my memory, is the opposite of like a small flyer, is like the biggest poster I've ever had.
Yeah.
And we're standing in the street discussing with each other, like talking with each other.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Like someone, I feel like maybe it was just seeing you perform, or maybe talking to someone. But somehow I learned that like you were a big comic dork, and I was like, okay, he plays in a rock band and he reads comics. I have to confront this guy. I need to like pick his brain. Um, and yeah, that's kind of how we met, was through Nardwar.
Yeah, it's true. Right there on Astorinos, which short-lived venue right there on the streets, like at a show. It's like the complete crossover of the comics music. Mitch Clem poster, free show. You and I meeting up, getting to know each other.
Yeah, I've only been to one other Astorino show, and it was another evaporator show.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that was like right after you had moved to town. Were you already doing so? Yeah, for people who may not know, like Pizza Punks existed for a very long time. You were doing it in a magazine, Dunk, that was out through Lucky's Comics Vancouver. Were you already doing Pizza Punks at that time? I can't remember the timeline.
In September, I was just invited because I moved at like mid-August, or like right before school started, because I went to SOVA in Dawson as my first year. It's like a foundation program. So I transferred to Emily Carr to do my remaining degree. And yeah, I don't know. I was just like a young kid looking for things to do. There's fun stuff to do on the drive. I can't even remember what I was doing, but I just remember walking up and seeing that flyer. And then just like trying to go to as many shows as possible. But yeah, I think it was October was the first strip. So it was like a month later. But around the time that I met you, that was probably when I got the email from Will inviting me to contribute.
How did that line up? Like, how did you end up getting? Was it just because you were going to Lucky's when you were in town, or like how did it end up you getting invited to be in Dunk?
Yeah, it was interesting to me because like I didn't know Will at the time. I knew Gabe, who's the owner of Lucky's, and he only knew me from being like a kid. Like I was a teenager, and I would fly to Vancouver to stay with my uncle for a week, and I'd enjoy the comic scene here and stuff. So I started self-publishing comics when I was 15, and I would bring them to Lucky's, and Gabe would sell them for me as a teenager.
Oh, wow.
So that's how I was introduced to Lucky's, was my uncle Chad. He showed me Lucky's, and I like fell in love with it and like the community that's there. So when I got the email from Will, he was like, "Hey, I work at Lucky's. I also am going to Emily Carr. Do you want to contribute to Dunk?" And I was like, "Yeah, totally, of course." But at the time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, just because I was making like science fiction comics and like zines and stuff like that. But I'd never like made like a consistent series or anything like that. So I just happened to have pizza in my backpack, and I remember I was listening to the Melvins, and I was at Kirsten's apartment when we were just starting to see each other. Yeah, the two of us, we came up with the idea of making a strip about punks eating pizza just from the things that were around me.
That's just sitting there, and like what you see is what you did.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then like the first strip is backpack pizza. Like that's the punchline. This guy's like skateboarding, and then he, realizes he's got pizza in his backpack and he eats it.
I do remember that one. I had no idea that was the first strip. Wow.
Yeah, and then it was just kind of this thing where Dunk was monthly, so it was just like felt doable because I was attending Emily Carr full time on a scholarship with my band, Champagne Ajac First Nations. So I was like super busy all the time because I had to take a full credit to be sponsored. So I was like, yeah, 3-panel strip once a month on top of my school workload. That's totally doable. And yeah, that's what I kept on doing. And I slowly made Pizza Punk strips more and more illustration teacher,
Oh,
assignments, and we would yeah, I'd twist the homework into being a Pizza Punk strip. And yeah, that's how I ended up getting like longer stories. And yeah, I'd have to flip through the issues, but yeah, there's definitely some that are like, or a lot of it were Emily Carr assignments.
well, yeah, because I mean, like I remember all these starting as a daily, but then it became, you were self-publishing and just putting the ones out. It seemed a lot more sequential, or like I don't want to say substantial because that's a rudeness that indicates a daily strip isn't substantial. But all of a sudden, it seemed like there were like longer stories in there or things like that. Or also, really early, you had a lot of pinups and things like that too. Like I really loved that. Like you started approaching it really as like a book when it started coming out.
Yeah, I just wanted to like have my friends draw Pizza Punks because I thought that was like a really fun thing. Like that's what I really like when I read a comic is when I finish it and then you like see the back of the book and you're like, oh, this author is friends with all these people and this is like their interpretation of these characters. And
Yeah, it just sort of reveals community like right away, which is always like obviously a thing that even like the strip has, or like a fascinating thing that's important to myself and I know you is like it shows the community you're part of, or you're like bringing your community and like your friends into it. It's sort of like I don't know, it makes it feel more like a group thing, even when it's your own thing, or at least allows you to involve other people in your thing.
yeah, it was kind of like unintentional in that regard because it was just like I was just a new kid in town and I wanted to make friends with everybody. So, if if I went to a show and like saw someone play, there was a good chance that like the next Pizza Punk strip that someone would be wearing their band shirt
Yeah.
or a poster would be on the wall for that band. And I kind of just like progressively did that more and more. Um, and I feel like part of it was kind of just like, hi, notice me, I'm the new kid in town, like please be my friend. um, but then it quickly became kind of like this like time capsule for like that specific era of Vancouver like independent music and comics too. Like,
Sorry, you totally cut out there, and then the audio came back in, and I could just hear a siren. So I was like, oh.
okay,
But like I didn't hear anything you said for about 30 seconds, and then I just heard a siren. That's why I was like, oh.
I'm gonna switch my modem, so I might drop out for a second, and I should be able to join. But I'm just hoping that whatever I said was recorded still.
Time will tell.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah. You
Okay.
You just froze for a second. You came right back. Great.
Okay.
This is the world. This is the world we live in, where all of our friends we get to see sometimes just become this like stuttering, dragging, glitchy monster.
Yes. Yeah, so kind of like the strip kind of unintentionally became a time capsule to like the Vancouver independent music scene and comic scene. Because of that, because I would, go to a all ages show or go to just a small show run by friends with bands that were friends of friends. And I was the kid who was new to town, so I was just like, if they if I saw them perform one week, there was a good chance that the next week that their poster or like their band would be on a poster on a t-shirt on one of the Pizza Punks. And yeah, it was kind of just like this unintentional thing that like I just wanted people to become friends with and also notice me. And I also wanted to do like work for local artists and people
Yeah.
too. So it was kind of just like trying to put my foot in the door. And then, also just running with it, like growing it into like longer strips, and testing out like my storytelling ability. Cause like I had a lot of fun doing like the 3-panel strips, and then it felt like restricting. So I did like 6-panel strips and then 8-panel strips. And then I started doing like full 1-page strips that were like 12 panels. And then I like stepped back, and then I started doing 1-panel strips. So it's kind of like all over the place. I was just trying to figure out like what I could tell as a joke in like, X amount of panels.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know, I like really cut my teeth like learning how I write comics with Pizza Punks.
Well, yeah, it also obviously like the pacing for all those formats is so differently, or like how you can tell a joke when you have a couple of pages versus 3 panels. I remember even being cognizant of that as a kid, reading Calvin and Hobbes, and there'd be the books where Bill Watterson would write about it. He'd be like, they used to cut the first 2 panels in some papers so you couldn't have them be relevant to the rest of the Sunday. And I remember like learning that it's like getting the peek behind the curtain. You'd be like, oh yeah, like it's always inconsequential for the first while in the early stuff, but it obviously affected so much of how even in like something like that he was able to pace it. And that was almost maybe my first indication of how the idea of pacing in comics, like, oh yeah, I guess it does make sense that having 3 panels, it would be harder to tell or different to tell a joke than if you have 10 pages or whatever. So obviously it's a really good way to sort of learn when you're just trying every different format. It's like, you're going to become a jack of all trades, master of all trades.
Yeah, it's funny, like you bring up Calvin Hobbes, because it's like such a big influence to me as a kid. Because I had a babysitter who showed me it at a very young age, and the comics are so creative and they're so funny, and there's so many layers to them. Because like reading them now as a young adult, they like hit completely different because there's all these jokes that fly over your head as a child. But yeah, like the amount of detail that were put into Calvin and Hobbes were kind of like something I aspired to do with Pizza Punks, because like when I thought of comic strips, I would think of like Family Circus or like like the Far Side or something. And like Far Side is like crazy, but it's also like really simplified stylistically. So I tried like the maximal approach with Pizza Punks.
Yeah. Well, yeah, even I like when I thought of Daily Zone as a kid, it's like Beetle Bailey and Hagar the Horrible and things that you like. I'm not like, oh, the art, like, when's the artist edition coming out for Hagar the Horrible? It's going to be terrific. And even as a kid, I always read Prince Valiant, even though I hated it, because I was like, well, at least it looks nice. Like, it looks good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that like maximalism was such not a thing in any other strip, really, like than Calvin Hobbes when I was younger. Everything else, yeah, mostly just looked like, they're like, I can draw like a stick figure. Here you go. We're done. He's complaining about his wife.
Yeah, a lot of misogyny. That's the punchline. Yeah, the thing with Calvin Hobbes too is like Bill Watterson does the same thing, where some strips, like the Sunday strip or whatever, where it's like a full page, like you'll have the opening panel be like half that page. It's like this crazy detailed shot of like dinosaurs on Mars, being chased by Calvin or whatever. And it's just like, that was such an eye-opener to me that like you could make an establishment like so grandiose in like a newspaper strip, because I was so used to just like a beginning, middle, and end. Like that's it. With a 3-panel comic, that's what you have. But with Calvin and Hobbes, it's like the stories can either start really huge or really small. And again, like Watterson, like he really emphasizes on details, and like he puts a lot of detail when it's necessary, and he retracts when it's not. And it's like really smart storytelling that being a kid in the Yukon, it was just like so mind-blowing, especially too because like he has a Yukon strip. It's got Yukon Ho. So like when I was a kid and I told people I read comics, that was like the first thing people would be like, well, have you read the Calvin and Hobbes Yukon book? And I was like, yeah, of course I know.
Well, that's all. I'm like talking about Calvin Hobbes. It's like recommending someone see The Godfather, but I'm like, but it's so good. Like there's a reason that it's so beloved. Like it's amazing. It's
Yeah,
still.
yeah.
I always think I'm like, oh, I'm too good for that. I'm like, I'm not. I'm never good enough. But it's interesting because you talked about like overloading or how much detail in a way, and like that was something that was so much in Pizza Punks. Is like you saying even putting in posters stuff. There's so many details in every strip that even I mean, you right before the start of this showed me an Easter egg that I'd never seen before, and I've read all those comics 50 times. And I was like, there's still stuff buried in there that you're not seeing, or I'm not seeing. But yeah, it's like so like yeah, like putting it in like layering and hiding so much of that stuff in Vancouver's specific stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of like unearthing like a like an artifact or a relic or something, and there's all those like layers of like gravel and mud and dirt and all that, and you're kind of like digging it up because the deeper you go, you're like, oh, there's this band that lasted 2 years, and then oh, there's this other Vancouver band that lasted 3 years. Oh, here's another band that actually made one album. Here's another band that made 3 albums. It's like
Yeah.
there's all this like Vancouver punk history in it, that like I guess like wasn't really archived anywhere besides, if you kept a flyer or maybe you have like photos of a show on your phone or something
Yeah.
like that. But there's like not a lot of like recordings of it. So
Well, yeah, there's so many. I think like from growing up in Vancouver in the scene, I mean, and now being in Toronto, it seemed different in the sense that like bands existed longer in Toronto. Whereas exactly that in Vancouver, a band might exist for 2 months and never record anything. And so I'm sure there's a few bands like that only the record of them is that someone's wearing their shirt in a Pizza Punk strip now. And
Yeah.
it's like there were so many bands like that I'd go see and I'd love them. And then 2 weeks later, you'd be like, oh, they broke up. And then you'd see a new band that two of them were in with like someone else you knew as a different thing. And like it was very unique for that. So it's like an archive of all these things that would be gone otherwise. Because it's also an awkward time for documenting the scene, I guess, because it's right when everyone started getting cameras in their pocket at all times or making little clips. But like that's so nebulous. It isn't a real document. This is the document.
Yeah, and like I don't know, I'm not a person that like goes through my phone like deep, like
Yeah.
I'm not like I think about a show when I like pick up the like the tour shirt when I'm about to put it on. I'm like, oh yeah, that was a fun show, but I'm not like going to my phone to watch a video that I recorded from that night or anything like that.
Yeah, like,
it's more like remembering the like feeling I had like attending that show.
yeah, no one's scrolling back to like March 16th, 2017 and looking at the 12-second clip of Nice Apple that they took. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, man, I love it. It's so great. But yeah, so actually the funny thing doing this for TCAF is that this sort of, I mean, I guess not this, but like Conundrum. So to get weird, like when you got on a Conundrum, you were out at TCAF when they agreed to start publishing you. And I remember that because it was like, we know each other so long and all of a sudden you were out here and I was so excited to have you. And then all of a sudden it was just like a feeding frenzy for Cole Pauls. It was so great. It's like people sniffing around and it was like so nice to see you get that recognition and Conundrum ended up publishing your work.
Yeah, like I've been pursuing, being published for a while, and when I was a teenager, like coming to Vancouver, a lot of it was like I would spend a week in Vancouver and then I would go to Emerald City Comic Con and like drive to Seattle with my uncle. And I would like try and introduce myself to like American publishers and American artists and, make connections in Seattle. And I did that for 8 years. And it kind of felt like I was getting nowhere with it. And like I had met really cool people and, I have lots of friends in the States now. But it didn't feel like I was making any like substantial leaps to like getting published or anything. I was like, this doesn't feel like my scene. It's too superhero. It's not indie enough, or it's not like just like the content that I'm making doesn't necessarily fit Emerald City Comic Con. So one year, I would save up all my money throughout the year, and then I would spend it to go to Emerald City. So the next year I was like, why don't I just go to TCAF instead? Because all my friends talk about how amazing it is. And every year it happens, I'm always envious of people getting to meet all these like amazing mangakas or other artists from around the world. So I did that. I was like, screw it. I'm not going to go to Emerald City this year. I'm going to go to TCAF. So I went and I introduced myself to like every publisher there. I gave the second issue of Dark Quarter Warriors to like 7 publishers, and I pretty much got the same answer from everyone. Was like, this is cool, let me know when the book's done. Because I kept on telling people that, like, there's going to be one more issue, and like then the book will be done. There's 3 chapters to it. And it's like a reoccurring thing with artists where people like, tell you that they have like this great idea and this project, but like you don't ever like see it come to fruition. So I feel like that was kind of like a learning experience for me. Was like a lot of publishers don't really want to deal with emerging artists until like the book is like done, or like they can like, you've like proved that like you can accomplish a whole book. So it wasn't until the next year when the 3rd issue came out. That's when I started getting like a lot of attention, because the people that I introduced the book to the year before, I showed up being like, I did finish my book. Look at me, I can accomplish my tasks. And then, I lucked out because Andy sent me an email like maybe a month before TCAF, and he was like, hey, I saw that you're almost done your book. Like, do you want to talk about like being published by me? And I was like, yeah, let's talk. Let's have a meeting at TCAF. And on the show floor, I got my book signed there. And it was like, I was tabling in the Wowie Zonk room. And I remember getting to run back to the Wowie Zonk room and being like, I'm signed. And like everyone, all the Vancouver people in the room and all my friends in that room too were like so stoked. And like, it was nice to have that experience.
I remember. Yeah. I mean, I remember it. It was so amazing. And just like, I think, I was probably running around somewhere, like bringing a Sharpie to somebody. And I remember I was probably trying to blow you off too, or something. I was like, oh, I'm busy. And you're like, no. And told me. And it's just like, yeah, the greatest feeling. Cause you've been like, you say that you're like hitting your deadlines. That is a big thing, but like you were always like working. I mean, even you're talking about how you like found ways to get your thing done by turning it into like things for school. Like you're always busting your ass and like always just working like so hard and getting stuff done. And it is true. It's like a lot of times people have, they're like, oh, I'm going to do this. But yeah, you just got it done. And like, you kept going. And so it was so be like, there it is, like finally. And especially, I don't know, because like meeting you, I just liked you so much. Like we got along so well. And then I was like, oh, I also love comics. They're so great. And so it felt like, I don't know, I got that little thrill where I'm like, yeah, I told you, here we are. And then like people are going to see. And it's amazing. And it's been just like astronomical since then. It's so nice.
Yeah, it's really nice because like a friend of mine, Sean Caremaker, he got published by Conundrum a year before me, or 2 years before me. And Andy asked him who he should publish next in Vancouver. And Sean was like, Cole, you should publish Cole. So I'm like forever grateful for Sean for, putting my name in his ear. Because it worked out. Because like the same like spring that Sean recommended me, Andy came to VanCaf, and Andy came to me and like bought my zines too, and like talked to me about like my projects and what my future goals were and stuff like that. And then 2 years later I got signed by Conundrum.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about, like community. Like, that's so great. Like Sean just being like, I know who's around. I know who I should talk to you about. And like pulling up people around you and like going to bat for people that you believe in your community. It's great.
Yeah. And now I get to pass the torch because Andy's asked me who he should publish next. So I'm like sending him my friend's work. And I'm like, this person's really cool. This other person's really great. So.
I was like, you just opened the gates, my friend. This is going to go up and everyone's going to be like, hey, Cole, just seeing how you are. How you doing? Just head and talk to a little bit. What's up?
Well, I don't know. It's like for me, being on the East Coast, or sorry, being on the West Coast for so long, and like being in the Yukon, so much of Canadian comics representation is like strictly East Coast.
Hmm.
Like, there's Seth, Chester Brown, Fiona Smith, DeForge, Patrick Kyle, all these people, they're like East Coasters. And then you bring up like the West Coast comics, and people don't necessarily think about like I don't know, maybe like Simon Roy or Johnny Christmas to be like, I don't know, these Canadian authors. Maybe it's because they're published by American people and they're doing kind of like mainstream comics or whatever. But like yeah, I don't know, it's just nice to have a spotlight on like Vancouver comics, because I feel like there's a lot of like hidden gems here that, like, our community is so small, so we all know each other and we all support each other, but like outside of our city, people aren't aware of like Andrea Lunik or like Kathleen Gross or something like that, so it's yeah, there's a lot of people I want to see on my shelf with a spine, with Conundrum's logo at the bottom.
But this is a weird thing. Like, I really noticed that, obviously, like being in Vancouver, like growing up in Vancouver and working comics there for a long time. And like I worked at Golden Age Collectibles, which is a lot more of like a mainstream superhero shop. And I was the guy who was like, no, let's make some room over. I'll order in like 3 copies of World Map Room by Yuichi Okayama, and I'll buy one and I'll hand sell the other 2. It'll be great. But like, there wasn't as much of a crossover. And so I found like there's lots of people I was aware of, but there wasn't as much of a crossover. And so when I came out to Toronto, part of why I think the community seemed so, you're like these, like the East Coast, was just because there was so much more of a cross connection in comics out there, where like guys who are writing big books for Marvel would come into the Beguiling and buy zines, like just come in and go to and buy local zines. And I didn't really see as much of that in the Vancouver comic scene, or it was a little bit more cordoned off, which is also really funny because music, the other world I was in, felt like the exact opposite, where Vancouver was so small that you sort of had to be open-minded. And like when you're young, it's like if you only like hardcore, you are going to watch the same 25 people play music for the next 10 years. Like, so you, like when I was young, I had to be really like, well, I need to get into like everything, because everyone is in 4 different types of bands and playing together. Whereas, yeah, Toronto was a lot more like big enough that people are like, I make folk music, I make punk music, I do this, and a little more sectioned off. But yeah, I think the comic scene, yeah, no, it was very strange. Like just for me, living in both of them and going out, it just seemed a lot more connected in Toronto than Vancouver. And not that I wasn't supportive, but just more like, yeah, people kept to their lanes a little bit more, and it sort of didn't feel as communal, or maybe.
Yeah, I would say like the communal spot for like the the top 2 pros or whatever, and like the indie crowd in Vancouver would have been like RX Comics, which is now deceased and has now become 8th Dimension. And for those who don't know what that is, it's like it's a comic shop that's on Main and where Kingsway meet. So it's like in this junction triangle, and this triangle is kind of like this is, I would honestly say it's probably the heart of Mount Pleasant.
Oh yeah.
Because you got Gene Coffee, where everyone goes to get coffee. There's the Wallflower, where there used to be the Vancouver Comic Jam. There was Dandelion, R.I.P. Dandelion.
Yeah, all right, Dandelion, the best record store in Canada. I used to work there part-time.
Yeah.
Down.
And the cool thing about that like junction triangle is the top floor to that whole building is just studio spaces. And it's mostly, there's some painters, but it's mostly comic artists. So there's like Pia Guerra, I think, is up there, like James Lloyd, Robin Bougie, Johnny Christmas is up there, Sean Caremaker is up there. So it's like that whole top floor of that building is kind of like Vancouver comic history, because there's just been so many graphic novels drawn and written in that building. And you walk by it, and I don't think people think twice of it unless you kind of know you have a friend who has a studio up there. But yeah, it's like such an important spot to Vancouver comics, at least in my eyes.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd agree for sure. It's like, as you say, it's like everything you want to go to. You can go to the comic shop, you can go to Pulp Fiction, you can go get a coffee, you can go to the Wallflower. It's like within, one triangle of space.
Yeah, and you can spend an hour there, and I'll bump into like 10 of my friends on, a normal day in life.
That's when I come back into town visiting, I'm always like, Penny and I take bets, my partner Penny and I, am like, who we're gonna run into first. And it depends where we're going. If we're going there, I know specifically like the group of people, or I'm like, I know who I'm gonna run into around there.
Yeah, totally, for sure.
Trying to go on. I guess, the other reason that I'm here talking with you, besides just why not, I'm me, you're you, we're talking, is because outside of the book coming out, which is out soon, there's also a tie-in 7-inch record coming out, the Pizza Punk 7-inch, featuring my band Tough Age and our friend Gal's band Dumb. Well, all of our friends in Dumb, on a 7-inch put out by Mint Records, local Vancouver label that is also both of those bands' labels. So it's that's like the ultimate reason that I am here talking with you, is because you had this thing in motion, which makes perfect sense for like music and comics. You were like, what if we do this record?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, like, since I've known you, I feel like I've bugged you about doing a collaboration with Tough Age. Like, probably, like, I bet I brought it up like the first time we met without even you knowing my heart. I was like, we should do something together. So yeah, it's kind of like this idea I've had in my head for a really long time. Before it was even like a Pizza Punks idea, I was just like, I really want to do a comic for a record or for a 7-inch or something, and it tied together to be like, a nice bundle. Mm-hmm. And it just made sense to pitch this idea for the Pizza Punks collection, because it was like, the Pizza Punks collection to me is like the comic equivalent to like collecting all the punk 7-inches into like one record and then like selling it as a 12-inch or whatever.
Yeah.
And like remastering it and stuff like that. And you're like, this is our album. It took us 12 years to make. It's 17 minutes long. It's got 15 songs on it,
Yeah.
So when I was collecting it to become a book, I was like, I really want to do this idea. It makes total sense to do it now. And then obviously, knowing you and how involved you are in the comic scene, and just like how big of a music dork you are too, I was like, it makes total sense to ask you.
Yeah. When you asked me, like, we were talking about this, because I totally forgot. Like, I remembered I was doing it, but I was like, oh, I'll probably give a unreleased earlier song. And you're like, no, you agreed to record something. And I didn't remember it all because we had the conversation at like 4 a.m. my time in Animal Crossing.
Yep.
Our meeting, I was like, oh yeah, I guess we did. And I was like, this doesn't sound like something I'd agree to do. Like, it sounds like I agreed to it for you, but you're like, you agreed to record a song about pizza. And I was like, I don't know that I do that. That doesn't seem like me. And I was like, of course I did. Why? You say jump, I say how high.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that you did. I can't wait to hear the song.
I know you still haven't even heard it. So that was like, this happened. And then since you asked me to do the song, I now no longer live in Toronto. I'm moving back to Vancouver. But also, of course, there's a little thing going on called the pandemic. And my band couldn't meet up and record, especially in Toronto. So we had to record in this like really piecemeal fashion. But it was great because the same, like, I mean, you know me, I'm kind of a brat. So you were like, do this. And I was like, I got it. And I wrote like a really nice song about a man making pizza, about like, that's what he does. It's a Dr. Oetker sub-brand, Giuseppe Pizzeria, about the nice day he has, like going to work. So I'm excited for you to hear it. I really am happy with it. But yeah, it's like we had to record, like Jesse, our drummer, had to go record it on his own with our friend Craig and then send it to me. And I've been recording it in a shed in the woods. But it's been so nice because I like packed up almost all my stuff, but I still have all the Pizza Punks. And so I was like, actually like looking at the comics, and like every time I'd sort of flag and be like, I don't think this is good, I'd look at the issues and get re-inspired and be like, I gotta do this. I'm so excited I can do this. I know it'll be good. And also because I'm so critical of music and comics, you're also like one of the only people who's ever made comics where I'm like, he understands music, so music comes across in comics properly.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I can't wait to write the liner notes where it says Tough Age wrote and recorded this in a shed.
Must have been in the shed, yeah.
Um,
But yeah, I don't know. Do you? Sorry, I actually have, or you had something to say because I had an actual question on that. I thought.
Yeah, it's just like yeah, I don't know what I was gonna say. Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I was saying as part of my like criticism of music and comics, like I don't know, it's depicted in a way that feels super authentic because obviously you're part of the scene. But like, was there ever a struggle or a challenge for you, or like, how do you? Because obviously, like visual depicting sound through visuals isn't like there's some very specific ways to do it, but it's not the easiest thing in the world. And you do it so well in the book, even like, it's not the focal point, but like, was there a challenge to that? Or like, how did you think about doing that? Like, how did you approach it?
Oh man, it's like the worst part, honestly. Like the likenesses and drawing equipment and stuff. It's so detail oriented and it's so easy to draw music equipment the wrong way. And I know that's like one of your issues with music comics is that like no one can draw a drum kit right.
Yeah.
Small things like that. You're like, that's not what it. How does that even attach to that drum? Like something like that.
Yeah, it's very pedantic.
So it's like just looking at a lot of photos. Like I was talking earlier to you about how no one looks at the photos they took 6 years ago at a punk show or whatever. I look at them for reference for Pizza Punks. And I had to do so much digging to do the dumb comic that's in the Pizza Punk 7-inch. Partially, I lucked out because, it was only a couple years ago. So picking Gal's brain about them touring, making that, or like making the comic about their tour was a bit easier. But a lot of it was like looking through like people that like helped organize their show, looking at their Instagram and looking at photos that they've been tagged in and scrolling back to like 3 years ago and stuff. So like deep digging into like strangers' profiles to find a random photo of Gal sitting on a couch at a house show, stuff like that. But it like is valuable documents for me. So luckily I was able to find a bunch of that and draw it in the dumb comic. And there's quite a bit of quite a bit of panels from that comic that are just photos that I just drew as strips. And it kind of it honestly kind of made things easier because it was less thinking. I was like, oh great, I can just make this panel, this photo, but at the same time I have to execute that photo now and I have to draw my friend, and I feel like I owe him a justice to try and do at least a half decent caricature of the person I know. So like that's like kind of the daunting part for me is making sure that you look like you and Penny looks like herself, and all these small things that like probably don't bug people too much, but like that it bugs me greatly.
Oh, it 100%. I've definitely had characters drawn of me. I remember we got a drawing done one time for a zine for a festival, and I was like, I look like George Lucas. Like, why did they do that to me? Whereas, in yours, I love it so much. I wanted to use that as my VanCAF announcement one. And literally, it's like I'm wearing this shirt that's been causing me so much consternation about wearing to meetings, where I was like, is tie-dye unprofessional? And it was similar, where I was like, you drew me like on stage, I'm wearing my cutoff like Marlboro Man jean jacket. And I'm like, I don't know if this is, I feel like this, I'm going to send this to people and they'll be like, not professional. I'm like, I can wear a jean jacket. It's fine.
I'm a cool festival director.
Yeah, come on. I'll turn my chair backwards, which you won't be able to see because but yeah, I think that it does. It means a lot, and like people definitely notice that and appreciate it. I love that, like which I guess at the time was billed as the last Pizza Punks comic. was the one that we were in.
Yeah.
Was it not? Because it's like us and Other Jesus and the Plodes, I think.
Yes.
That one. Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to Reed, who did, I think he did lights or the sound for that Evaporator show that we met at 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And Reed was a classmate of mine at Emily Carr. So yeah, the funny thing about that was like I made it for Print Ready, which it's like a zine group show at Dynamo Arts Association, which doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, so I was invited to make a zine for that art show, and I was like, I want to make a new Pizza Punk strip for it, but I was kind of like, I just graduated Emily Carr, and my last comic before that was like, I think it was my Lino Cut comic.
Yeah.
So I was like, that was so exhausting, and it was like my grad piece at Emily Carr. So I was like, that kind of felt like my last hurrah. I was like, this is kind of like my like glorious end piece of it all, because it's so complex and so silly to do as a woodcut.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be fun to just do like a one-off 8-page comic. Oh, okay, I'm back. I thought it'd be fun to do like a one-page, or I thought it would be fun to do an 8-page comic. That was kind of just like a standalone thing. And when it came out, I did say, I was like, this is the last Pizza Punk strip for a while. And that was because I was moving on to make Dakota Warriors.
Yeah.
So I drew a whole graphic novel between the 4th and 5th issue in the book. So Pizza Punk's, like the collection, you really see my style progress, and kind of like I figure out my formula. But yeah, the funny thing about that comic too is like I made it and I didn't really tell anyone that they were in it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I told you. I didn't tell any of the other bands. And I posted the cover, and I got 3 messages from each band, like one message from each band being like, I don't remember booking this show. I can't play this show. Please put me off the bill. Put my name on the poster, because we can't play it. And I was like, don't worry about it. It's a fake show. I drew it. Like, it's not real. And they were like, oh shit. Okay. Thank God, because I can't do it. And the funny thing was like, Other Jesus played their last show like a month before, and they like, kind of did like a send-off breakup show. So that was like already a thing when I was drawing it. I was like, man, this band broke up, but I still have them in it.
Yeah.
And then you, like Tough Age, had just announced that you were moving to Toronto. So I was like, Tough Age is gonna leave Vancouver. So what does that mean about the lineup? And then the same thing with the Plodes. Like Reed was he was in between band members at the time. Yeah. So it was like this funny thing where like the 3 bands I picked all were like done or in some form of hiatus, and everyone got really upset because they thought I like booked them for a show that they never signed up for.
Well, I was like, there's no way I wrote you like that. And then I paused for 1 second. I'm like, I'm self-aware. I definitely wrote you like that.
Yeah, I got a lot of relief.
Thanks. I can't do it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, people were really polite about it. They were like, this happens all the time where I'm put on a bill that I never said yes to. And I'm like, I would never do that to you. I respect you too much.
I used to have a standing order with Todd from the band Time Cops and some other bands around town, because, I mean, like there are not many fat people in music scenes, and there was like him and I, and we were like the fat white dude with a beard. And so people would often mistake us for each other. So we had a standing order that we were allowed to book each other's bands onto shows just to like screw with the people asking to book us. So people like, can Time Cops play down at pub 340 like next Wednesday? Be like, yeah, no problem. And then they'd message Time Cops, be like, so you're in? And Todd would be like, absolutely not. And we did that to each other 3 or 4 times.
Oh man. Yeah, it's it was a funny thing. to get all these messages like instantly, and then also just to see the relief of everybody being like, oh, thank God, because I can't even do it.
One of the things I love about that strip is that it seems almost like, I mean, it's kind of like a fantasy, right? It's like in that one, it's like all the pizza keeps coming and no one knows where it comes from. But I was so shocked because we had an experience like that once on tour. And so I was like, were you there? Because it was in Idaho at a house show called the Dildo Factory. We were playing a show there, and all this pizza just kept appearing. And we were like, when you're on tour, you never eat properly. So like, we probably had like some like I don't know, combos from the gas station. And we were there, and then all this pizza came out. And I remember we were all eating it, and we're like, this is amazing. But unlike in yours, which is this beautiful paradise of everyone eating the pizza and no one knows where it came from, we found out where ours came from, which was the dumpster behind a pizza restaurant where they threw it all out. And it had all been stored in scented Glad garbage bags. So it all kind of tasted like lemon pledge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, this is like the perfect version. This is like if you were on tour and played that show and this happened, it's like you created this perfect ideal of it in the comic of like where I had lived the hellish reality.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Freegan pizza.
Yeah.
That's a strip in I think the second issue.
Yeah, just to stir in the garbage bag. I'm not a snob, I'll eat it. Or a scented garbage bag. Regular garbage bag, I'll take it. I'm on tour. Yeah,
that's so funny. It's like for Dumb's comic, like I asked Gal, I was like, what are your pizza stories? And he was like, oh, we have a bunch, but we have this story how we got a DC jumbo slice with a band Clear Channel, and then like we went to the Lincoln Memorial, and then Awad, who later joined Clear Channel, he's now like the front man of Clear Channel, he was like twerking in front of Abraham Lincoln's memorial, and we were like all having such a fun time, and we're just like being goofs all night. And I was like, oh, that sounds perfect, I'll make a comic about it. And I sat down and got Gal to like tell me the whole story, and I interrogated him and I wrote notes, and then like there was a lot of back and forth when I drew it and stuff. But yeah, it was just funny how he had this great story for it, but he didn't think it was that funny. He was just like, oh, it was just like we had pizza and then we went out. And I was like, no, that's a great story, it's funny. And of course, Gal fashion, he tried changing the comic to be about a castle, and how this is a story for him to tell another time, but he tried to break into Robert Plant's castle on tour. So if you ever see him in person, ask him about that night.
I gotta ask. I don't even know this. I know he loves castles, but that's the long and short of it. Well, I think that again, like one of the things that shows, like sitting down and talking to it, why in Pizza Punks, like the punk scene, obviously because you're part of it, but it's like depicted properly, which is, I mean, I think you're probably the only comics about music I've ever read where anyone is played and you don't see a monitor once, because like you have a reference for those shows existing. And that's so, I mean, like sitting down and talking to Gal, like you're getting like the actual real thing. And that's like outside of all the like how great the comics are and that they're just like effortlessly funny and like so fun visually, is that, it's like, it's music. It's like a scene that doesn't get represented, and that you represent the punk scene so properly, not sort of like your parents' idea of punk that is often in comics.
I definitely I like to consume a lot of like movies and documentaries, and I was trying to absorb like the punk community versus like, Hollywood's version of what a punk is, or like I was trying to avoid like the villains in Power Rangers, they all look like they're like Streets of Rage characters or something like that, and they all look the same, but they're just wearing like different hairstyles. So yeah, I was like absorbing a lot of that, but also trying to learn what to avoid to like make it too corny or like too fake or whatever. And yeah, that just comes from, attending shows and noticing small things and not really thinking about it, and then being like, oh no, I I drew that roof to have a bunch of holes because the Redgate original building does have all those tiles missing and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And it's small details like that that like the Vancouver community like loves.
But I think that also is just like one of the really cool things is like why it feels so real is because you are so observant, and like in your comics work in general, like one of the things that's really strong in it is how observant and how much like that is in there that comes through, where like there's tiny things, but that just makes it seem like so much more naturalistic and like reads so much more authentically. Like your work is very like I don't know, just has detail that a lot of comics don't have.
I think I think it was Anya Davidson that said this, but they were talking about their book like Band versus Band,
Yeah.
and how there's very little performing in it.
Mm-hmm.
And the interview, I can't remember who was interviewing her, but they were like, why? And they were like, well, it's because 99% of being in a band is not performing. It's like the relationships of being a group and being on tour and like needing food. It's not about going on stage and like melting people's faces. Like that's a part of it, but it's like that's not like that's not like the only thing in like the music world, it's like
Yeah.
everything around it.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like it's like the condensed version of doing a comic. Is you're like you sit down and you write this comic and you spend months, years on it, and then someone gets it and they might be like, "I'm gonna read this today," and like they get to choose their timeline on it. It's like music. You drive, especially in Canadian music, sometimes you drive 8 to 12 hours, and they're like, "Well, you got 14 minutes." And
Yeah.
so that's not what you remember. Like, of course not. If you've been in a van with the same four people for like a month, 8 hours a day, when you're on stage, is yeah, exactly you say. It's sort of, or Anya says, it's just like the blip on the radar, and like what's been going on in your life.
Yeah.
But yeah, the time, just like how much the time up front to the finished product. I don't want to think about it too much.
Yeah. It's a lot of work for almost nothing.
Well, it benefits me because you do all the work and then I get to have it. And as you say, I get to put it on my shelf, look at that spine, put it next to my other cool work, and it's great. Like it exists. I think that's always like where I have to get to. I'm like, you make something, even if it's not perfect, you have the thing and it exists and like it doesn't go away. Like you've done it. It's cool.
Yeah. It's something I've like thought about too recently is like that strip may have taken me like, 3 hours to draw or whatever, but like the life of it is so much longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I include all these details that Calvin and Hobbes, convinced me is, worth keeping in.
Wow, you really brought it right home when we have about 2 minutes left in the panel. So I think that is a great point to say we're going to stop talking for now. But Cole, thank you for asking me to be here and get to talk to you again. It was a thrill 3 times over, and that you asked me meant so much to me, and it means so much to me because we're going to get to do it again, maybe, or at least you're going to do it again for VanCAF. So if you're watching this and you're like, I got to get more of that Cole Pauls, which why wouldn't you? VanCAF, we're going to have a Pizza Punks party. So you can come on out and celebrate the release of that a couple of weeks online. VanCAF. VanCAF.com.
VanCAF.com. Thank you both so much for being part of this conversation today with us. I thought it was amazing. It was so fun to hear all of your stories, and I can't wait to get a book of Pizza Punks myself. Like, I am so excited to have that book. That's fine on my shelf. I wanted to say also that if you are interested in seeing more of Cole's work, a great place to see some of it is at our virtual exhibitor page. Cole's doing all of the design for the virtual exhibitor site that we have for TCAF this year. So you can hop on over there. And while you're there, you can also visit all of our exhibitors and browse through all of their wares. It's open through Saturday, May 15th. So click on over and buy some comic books. TCAF would like to take a moment to thank our programming sponsor, the Seneca College of School of Creative Arts and Animation. And also give a special thanks to the Beguiling Books and Art and Page and Panel, the TCAF shop. TCAF also acknowledges government support from the Canada Council for the Arts, Ontario Arts Council, and Toronto Arts Council. This is only the beginning of the amazing programming we've got lined up for TCAF 2021. So please be sure to check our schedule on our website and join us for some more excellent comics, conversations, and events, including Comics Night in Canada. And actually, Jarrett, can you tell everyone a little bit more about Comics Night in Canada?
Oh yeah, Comics Night in Canada is going to be a really big, exciting event. So it's all CanCAF, branding under CanCAF. So Canadian Comics Festivals, VanCAF, TCAF, MCAF, and Quebec BD, and we're all coming together for the Comics Night in Canada, La Soirée de la BD. I'm from the West Coast. Please forgive my French accent. So there's 2 artists. Let me give you the rundown. 2 artists enter, 1 artist leaves. Well, actually, both artists are going to leave. They'll have a great time. So for 4 total events, 2 artists, each representing a different Canadian city, are going to battle through the art of drawing. And every week, different cities face off until the big finale on May 27th. And you, as the viewer, yes, you, who is watching for sure, will have the opportunity to vote for your favorite artist and city to help that city get crowned the Comics Champion for 2021. The events will be live streamed on YouTube, and I believe it's going to be moving around to coincide with all the festivals so that everyone gets a little bit of home team advantage, home stadium. So the first event will be May 6th, which is at 4 Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, and then following it up on May 13th, May 20th, May 27th. So stay tuned for that. We're going to have more artist details to come. It's going to be a big old shindig for another little Vancouver Easter egg on this. So I hope to see you there.
The TCAF hometown episode is on May 13th. So join us then to vote for Toronto. Although I have to say that, I think all those cities are great. I want everyone to win. Thanks again, both of you, for joining me this afternoon. I'm so happy to have the opportunity to talk to you, and thanks a million, although you did all the talking. See you later, and I hope everyone is having a wonderful TCAF.
Bye.